J-Mac, it's OTA day, at least OTA day where you can report to OTAs, which means we will see a little bit more from that OTA. The team obviously reported yesterday. How you doing on this Wednesday morning, my friend?
Yeah, just finding out it's Wednesday, so that's good. I thought it was Tuesday. Yeah, I'm just like an NFL team. You screw up a day on me, and I just pretend it doesn't exist, and we're in a normal week. So, but it is Wednesday. Happy Wednesday to everybody. Eagles' first open OTA. They had an OTA, on-field open OTA that was not open on Tuesday to the media. So that's the time of the year you don't get to see everything. So Nick Sirianni's talking this morning before practice, assorted players, including Jalen Hurts after practice. Practice is about 12:20. Hopefully it stops raining by that point, which I think it's supposed to. And there you have it. We're off and running with Sean Mannion's offense. And we'll see how quickly the raving starts. I think it'll start pretty quickly.
Yeah, John, what's the schedule look like today? I know you put it out there. I think you said you're going to speak with Jalen Hurts at some point today. What does that look like for what can Eagles fans expect to see on the timeline today?
Yeah, Nick before, just as I said, Jalen after, and assorted players. We don't know the other players. Normally it's going to be Lane if he's there. It's going to be normally that'd be an AJ Brown spot, but he's not going to be there. So
maybe Smitty,
Devontae Smith potentially stepping up. We talked about defense yesterday. Could be Jordan Davis, could be Zach Vaughn. One of those could be Cooper, one of those types of guys. So, yeah, we'll get off and rolling for the 2026 season. But obviously, Jalen Hurts is the most notable because a lot has gone on. Everything from the reports that, he's uncomfortable with certain things, the change in the offense again. He's working out with Scott Leffler, the contract, a lot of stuff, which I'm 99% sure he'll not address the contract, but it'll probably get asked at some point. A lot of stuff with Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, and obviously the Leffler stuff, which you mentioned, Leffler, the new offense, it's going to be interesting to hear. I don't know how much he'll give you, but, I do think it's fair to ask, obviously, those questions about the Leffler and the proxy war that you've called here on JAKIB.
Could be nothing. Could be everything. Yeah. It's weird.
I don't know if I'll tell you it's anything, but I think it's something.
It's weird. I know that. You don't see it. So at the bare minimum, it's weird if you have a quarterback who wants to continue to work with the guy they essentially fired at the position. It's not normal way of doing business, I'll say that.
Well, we'll see what ends up happening with all of that. Obviously, the new coaching staff is in. John, the other thing is when Mannion spoke last week, didn't hear much about Parks Frazier or who's the other guy that they brought in? I guess
Josh Grizzard.
Yeah,
you got
Josh
Jared
Grizzard.
Johnson. You got 97 ex-quarterbacks. So
yeah, and we didn't hear much about Josh and Parks Frazier last week. I don't know if
well, you got a little bit of Vic Fangio with the titles letting you in on the secret that if you watch the show you're already in on, but yeah, it's not that important. I mean, Josh Grizzard's not going to be a big part of what basically you got to worry about Sean Mannion and Parks Frazier. That's what you got to worry about when it comes to Jalen Hurts. Everybody else is supplementing support staff, things of that nature. But those are the two guys that are going to be working the closest with Jalen Hurts. And those are the two guys you should hold responsible, good or bad. Those are the guys who are going to be doing it.
Yep, no doubt about it. It's going to be interesting to see. John, with on-field OTAs, there's not much you do see today, right? There's not like pads or anything like that. It's just kind of the guys getting out there, getting their legs loose and running around a little bit, basically. What are you expecting to see from your trip down to NovaCare today?
Well, do get to see some 7-on-7s, which is heavily offensively tilted. So you expect the offense to look good, and if it doesn't, that's a concern. Some team stuff. You'll have 11-on-11. Offensive and defensive line are just out there basically to really just give you the perception of a real formation. Obviously, there'll be one-on-one stuff as well. So you get to feel this is the time of the year where athletes stand out. It's flag football basically. So, um, you want to see the receivers, you want to see the running backs in the passing game, you want to see the secondary guys, you want to see the linebackers in pass coverage, that kind of thing. That's what these camps are for. Really passing camps, glorified passing camps. If there's high school football fans out there and your kids play and all the off season, all it is 7-on-7 passing camps. That's what it is basically, the NFL version. And when it comes to the offensive and defensive line, it's about the technique work and the one-on-one stuff, and that's a little bit different because you have Chris Cooper instead of Jeff Stoutland. So I'm sure there'll be quite a few eyes on Chris Cooper, and there has been. So but it's really tough. Anybody who starts to gauge, to be honest, offensive line playing with no pads. I mean, think about the silliness of that.
Right.
I wrote about Markel Besha. I looked at a player at each position. You have to pick somebody. So I picked Markel Bell. And I'm like, I just want to see how edge rushers sort of try to approach him because he's so big. He's so enormous. Like, you're not going to, you can run around him, but it will take you forever. So, do you try to get low? What do you try to do? So little things like that.
Probably line up wide and try and beat him to the edge, but we'll see what people do on that. John, you got to correct me here I don't know if I remember this incorrectly. Like you always say, sometimes it all runs together. Was 7-on-7s last year when you started to see that they were barely pushing the ball downfield at all offensively, or was that only training camp? Do you remember you used to do your training camp reports and you'd be like, I don't really know, Zander. They're not really throwing the ball much outside of the flats and, some short stuff. And I'm like, okay. But it turned out to be that's kind of the way they were going to play offense. So I'm wondering if there actually is more we can learn from this period than anticipated.
Sometimes I think when if you go back to 2024 and Saquon, it was like, everybody was excited and all they did was basically use him as a decoy and run him outside the formation in the receiving game. And that turned out to be true for the most part. They don't use him that much in the passing game outside the occasional wheel route. So there are little things you can pick up. But yeah, that was camp. That was training camp. When it becomes very like we only get in one day this week, one day next week. Like there's not enough time to develop themes. They might be doing something. They definitely were doing something different as they install stuff yesterday versus today. So you can't really get a theme. So that became after you're there every day and it's just day after day after day. And then you can kind of pick up on those themes. So kind of tough this time of year because you're only in there once. They're going to have three. They have clusters of three. So you only get to see 33% of it. You got to be careful when you're drawing conclusions from that. You're seeing a very incomplete picture. In training camp, they have to open up every single practice.
Right.
And you still don't get, there's so much you don't get to see, from meetings and which are never been more important, certainly for this team, but around the league as a whole. And even developmental periods and little stuff they do after practice. So you never get a complete picture, but you get a much more complete picture in training camp than you do this time of year.
No doubt about it. John, the other big thing here that we're going to be looking for is this is presumably, John, the last week that A.J. Brown will be a Philadelphia Eagle. You remember Howie and Nick? Well, right now, A.J. Brown's an Eagle. Okay, well, this might be the very last week of him being on the Philadelphia Eagles, which means you're going to see a different looking receiver group, Johnny Mack, whenever you lose a player like that. I think that's something to keep an eye on, obviously, to see how this team plans on managing and working through and getting better through the loss of a player as good as A.J. Brown. That's obviously top of mind for everybody. I'm curious to see what that receiving group looks like out there during OTAs.
Yeah, I some business on air real quick. BLG is going to try to hop on at 9:20, so just to let you know. But
Nice.
I forgot it was Wednesday, so I didn't ask him. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I like this team has been operating like AJ's not going to be here. So, I mean, I don't think it changes that much for them. For the outside world that hasn't believed it, maybe it changes a little bit.
Well, it certainly changes for them in terms of how they're going to play football.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they've been coming up with this plan for a long time, is what I'm trying to say. And whether what it looks like, it's it's going to be Dontavian Wicks and Mekhi Lemon stepping up. To me, the only question is obviously Wicks is going to play more outside, Lemon's going to play more inside, but I do think you have flexibility with Devontae and hopefully Lemon to play both, and even Wicks for that matter. To me, the question is, how quickly do you get to Devontae and Mekhi Lemon when there's only two receivers on the field? I think that will start with Wicks, Devontae and Wicks, because he's the veteran. He knows this offense in a lot of ways. He's the one guy, even though he's new here, he's not new to this offense or projected offense. So he should be ahead of everybody from that standpoint. Terminology, which we talked about yesterday, he should be ahead. So I do think you're going to hear a lot about Wicks early, and hopefully Lemon can pick up things quickly. That's the goal. And then, I think the less important thing that nobody cares about with receivers, nobody cares about special teams. Look, this, and you see it with the Rams, you see it with the 49ers, you see it with the Packers. Receivers got to block in this offense. And who's going to it's one of the reasons Lemon is here. He's physical. He's small, but he's physical. Devontae's small, but he's physical. Wicks is bigger and has a history with it. So, I mean, the receivers and the tight ends, but the receivers have to block in this. They have to block in every offense, but it's more important in this style of offense that they get going.
Yeah, well, we're going to see, Johnny Mack. I mean, I know you said the team has been preparing for life after AJ, but preparing for it is different than actually dealing with it. Because that's a good player, John, that they're going to lose, and I am curious to see what Mannion's goal is to try and we talk about.
Well, remember, he's never had him. So
yeah, but still, he's got to improve the Eagles' passing game, and you're asking him to do that while getting rid of the very best player that would have enabled.
Well, remember, they stunk though. From his standpoint, if I'm Sean Mannion, this is how I approach it. I've never had him. It was so bad last year; it's got to be better. I'm playing with house money if I'm Sean Mannion.
All right, that's a fair way to look at it. But the expectations here were already set. Because
I mean that's part of what he's going to have to deal with. And sometimes the expectations are unrealistic. And if they expect to have a receiver better than an A.J. Brown, if that's the expectation, well, it's not going to work. You can't worry about it.
No, but I think they expect an improved passing game.
Well,
it's not going to be that easy to do, losing a great player like A.J.
I think it's going to be pretty easy, and it has nothing to do with AJ Brown.
Right, just because they were so bad, right?
Yeah. I think it's got to do with the quarterback accepting the offense. And if he does that, it's going to be better. How much better? I don't know, but it's going to be better.
We'll see. We will see what ends up happening with this team.